I chose instead to bite down, to, ball my fist, to clench my teeth, to tighten my shoulders and be like, F the world, man. I got this. I got to prove everyone wrong. But what I should have been doing a long time ago was just proving myself right. If I reverse engineer my career back to its beginning, is this: you can't always make a right decision, but you can make a decision right now and then make it right. Wow. It's probably going to cost me my jobs. I'm probably never going to get hired at Ryerson University or any university for that matter. I'm probably going to end up losing Wyconic and Student Life Network a whole lot of business, but I'm just going to say it because this is for the benefit of students.
What is going on, guys? Welcome to another video, a podcast, wherever you're watching or listening to this. I have a very special guest for today's episode, the little legendary Hamza Khan. Now, let me read you his credentials real quick because this is crazy. Like, I'm actually nervous about this interview. But he's a multi-award-winning marketer, a best-selling author, a global speaker, a two-time TEDx featured speaker. He owns a marketing agency. He works at Ryerson. He's been featured in, get this, Business Insider, Globe and Mail, Adobe, Huffington Post, CBC, Asana, and more. Like, I don't think you can get any more accomplished. Like, I feel like, I don't know. But guys, Hamza, thanks for being here. I really appreciate this.
My man, thank you, man. That was a very generous introduction, and it's the feeling never goes away. When other people describe me, it never quite feels like they're talking about the person that's listening to that. Anytime I hear an introduction like that, anytime I hear those accomplishments recited back to me, I have an out-of-body experience. It doesn't quite feel like the very person that produced those milestones, that produced those things that you described. And so it's a nice reminder. It's a very pleasant and humbling reminder that I do have to step up and occupy the role that I've created, either intentionally or inadvertently. And so I appreciate you sharing that and sharing that enthusiasm. I can definitely feel it across the screen. Thanks, man. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. It's a pleasure to be here with all your listeners and viewers.
For sure. Well, thanks for being here. Do you ever feel like, after talk, I gave the bio and everything, do you ever feel like you need to keep yourself on top of things now? Because, you know what I mean? Like, you have a certain level you achieve. Now you have to, like, if you fall off, there might be imposter syndrome. Or, like, do you ever feel like you have to constantly maintain this level of success?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, man. I've never gotten rid of the imposter syndrome. I've given up trying to eliminate it. It's just something that I've learned to live with and learned to manage. I've learned to cope with it. It's this little demon, this little cretin, this little monster like Smeagol in The Lord of the Rings that just, it pops up at such inopportune times. In fact, when you were reciting that intro, and it's funny because you asked me before, you're like, hey, Hamza, can I tell you the intro? And I'm like, no, surprise me, man. I want to hear this because I like that feeling of discomfort, that sort of separation between who I am and how I'm moving through the world and what I'm experiencing, and then how you see me. And I talk about this a lot. I talk about this especially in the context of personal branding, that a good personal brand synchronizes how you see yourself, how you want to be seen, and how others see you. So how I see myself and how you see me at this moment on this day are very different. I'm going through a bit of a rough day. And I don't feel like I'm at my most accomplished. I don't feel like I'm at my sharpest. I don't feel like I'm totally in the zone. Now, of course, in speaking to you and doing this conversation, I'm back in. But even just a few seconds before jumping on this podcast, even while you were reciting that intro, that little imposter crept back in, that little Smeagol character. And it was like, Hamza, you don't deserve to be on the podcast. Who the F are you? Why would anyone interview you? And that was a terrible Smeagol impression. I did my best.
That was so good.
Are you sure? That was the worst impression I've ever heard. But man, and I think this illustrates my point perfectly, where I would say most days, I don't feel like the Hamza that you see. Who was that? Was that Siri?
I don't know. Was it Siri or?
I think I triggered Siri. I think my Smeagol impression was so bad that it actually offended Siri, and Siri just literally said, "I don't quite understand." But the point is, brother, I'm already off to a terrible start. This is a terrible start to the podcast, man. But let me answer your point succinctly over here. I do feel immense pressure. I do feel immense pressure to live up to the Hamza that I think exists outside of my own body, that exists in the imagination of Alif and the listeners and the viewers and the people who see me on stage, my students. Any public image of Hamza, any public repository of my thoughts, my ideas, my accomplishments, whether it's my website, a Skillshare course, you know, the TEDx talks, all of that. Like I said, it doesn't feel like me. And I don't know if your listeners or viewers can relate to that, but I feel an immense sense of imposter syndrome. It almost feels like that Hamza is aspirational reach. And then I wake up every morning and I have to remind myself, I literally have to coax myself back into the character. It's like, oh shit, I have to be that Hamza. I have to be the Hamza that Alif thinks I am. Does that make sense?
That makes a
It
lot of
sounded like
sense.
a whole bunch of gobbledygook. That sounded like some
Oh.
Kanye symphony bullshit.
No, man, that's actually fat. Because to me, so like I really look up to you and everything. So
Thank you,
to
brother.
hear
That means a lot,
someone I
man.
look up to say that they actually they feel imposter syndrome, it humanizes you in a way. I feel like you're like me. We're all kind of the same. And if anything, just literally hearing that, it even had an effect on me when you started saying that kind of stuff. So that's really fascinating in itself.
You know what it is, man? It's when I was younger and I was looking up at the world and I didn't have these accomplishments, I sort of dreamed up who I wanted to be, but it wasn't a complete dream. I sort of dreamed up different accomplishments. I dreamed that someday I would be a public speaker. And you know what's crazy? That's a dream that only happened very recently. I would say within the last years, within the last 5 or 6 years. I always dreamed that someday I'd be financially free. I dreamed that someday I'd be in love and all of this and all of that. And then when it finally started to click into place, when I finally started accomplishing those things, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to feel because I've spent so much of my life existing with my back up against the wall, feeling like I had to hustle, feeling like I had that chip on my shoulder, feeling like the world was out for me. Like I sort of approached my path to success with anger, with bitterness, with almost a resentment and a hostility, and it wasn't very healthy. And I'm sure we're going to get into that at some point if we talk about stress and burnout. But the truth is, I'm only now adjusting to the reality that things are happening for me, and I'm quote unquote successful by the definition of a younger Hamza, and maybe people around me and people who see me and perceive me through the ether, that is social media, on stage, television, what have you.
Wow, dude, like that speaks to me so much because I remember I left my marketing, my first HR job to get into marketing. I had no experience, connections, or education, and I was able to make it work within a couple of weeks and get my first marketing role at Kenny Box, mainly because I really wanted to prove my previous employers wrong. Because I was like, hey, Kevin, I quit. Are you sure? Are you sure? Yeah, I quit. And I had this like I said, literally chip on my shoulder. So every day I would just, again, be in state of like miniature resentment, and I use that to fuel me. And although I got a lot done, I noticed I would post about my hustle on social media, showing off how hard I was working on social media, and I started realizing like I got things done, but I don't know if I'm the most happiest. And I started realizing I feel like there's 2 ways or 3 ways to see it. There's like the when you're in a state of gratitude and you're kind of working and you're enjoying the process and like you feel good. Then there's like that chip on the shoulder kind of hustle grind type of mode. And then there's like you're just not working or whatever, you feel off and everything, right? It seems like there's like different realms to sort of thinking, right?
Oh, 100%, man. I that speaks to me very deeply. Like I said, this is a very new feeling to me, and I totally understand where you are right now and the path that you just walked on. That was a path that I stayed on for far too long, even while I was succeeding, and I had no reason to be in conflict with anyone. I had no reason to elect nemesis and enemies and create these negative reinforcements. I had every reason to be just operating from a place of excess, abundance, love, gratitude, but I chose instead to bite down, to ball my fist, to clench my teeth, to tighten my shoulders and be like, F the world, man. I got this. I got to prove everyone wrong. But what I should have been doing a long time ago was just proving myself right. Because if you prove people wrong and you run out of people to prove wrong, you're going to find and direct that negative energy somewhere. And you just start to create, in an almost paranoid way, adversaries. You start to create reasons and reasons, things to blame and circumstances to blame, and you start to wallow in that self-pity. And it was just a bad scene, man. I wish I had made that switch earlier in my life. And so when I see someone like yourself, when I see someone like Astawa Alam, a friend of yours and a mutual friend, when I see this young generation of people, especially people who share similar intersectionalities. You're the children of immigrants, right? We identify with a certain with certain subcultures. We would consider ourselves to be Desi, right? I think you're Bangladeshi, if I'm not mistaken. And my parents are from India, and I have a lot of friends that are Pakistani, so on and so forth. I see that you are able to, at such a young age, comparative to when I was there, make that realization that you're going to have to switch gears at some point, that having that negative motivation to get out of your circumstances is one thing, but don't stay in that mindset. Switch your mindset as soon as possible and operate from a place of excess and gratitude and love and care and compassion and empathy. And your life is going to be so much better, man. I'm experiencing that now, and I'm 33. I'm an old man. I'm not sure if your viewers can see it. I got gray in my beard, man. My bones crack like bubble wrap when I wake up in the morning. My knees are weak, and I sprained my ankle at the beginning of COVID, and it still hasn't healed. So, I look to you, and I feel like, I don't know if I was able to play a role in you seeing me as a blueprint or seeing me as a cautionary tale, probably the latter. But I hope you're able to skip some of the steps and accelerate your personal, professional, and academic growth. And a big piece of that, I hope, for you and all of the listeners, especially those of us who don't have a blueprint, who don't have people that we can look to and ask for advice, are able to realize soon enough that you don't have to burn anger and resentment for motivation and motivational fuel, that there are cleaner forms of energy.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful. So on that topic, then, like, there's a lot of my friends that look up to you. Literally before this, I posted on my Instagram story, gonna go, interview Hamza and everything. My random friend, I like in Scarborough was like, oh, I have his book. My brother was like, oh yeah, here's his book, borrow this. And then Godwin messaged me. He's like, oh, you're gonna do this? That's awesome. And like literally people is coming out of like nowhere. So it's very evident that, you're able to grow a brand, and like people like me and my, I guess, generation, I guess you could say, really look up to you and your success. So with that being said, yeah, crazy. So with that being said, if someone, let's say hypothetically, were to replicate your process in a way, because, again, like they see what you're doing and everything, and they aspire to be that, how do you advise them to, I guess, replicate it? Or what advice or route do you think they should take or shouldn't take? Or what does that look like?
First of all, man, that was very kind of you to share that. And I'm learning now to be okay with this. I think I kind of resisted this idea that I'm anything, that I've accomplished something that is worth commenting on. I'm not remarkable. I sort of diminished and deflected that praise in years past. Like if you would have said that to me 2 or 3 years ago, I've been like, oh, what are you talking about, bro? I'm just, I don't deserve it. That's not me. And I have to learn to accept that and accept it graciously, because it does mean to me. It means a lot to me, and it motivates me to continue being somebody that can inspire and provide value and motivate, and at the very least provide cautionary tales. So thank you, man. I come into existence. I sort of become aware that I'm Hamza when I hear things like that. Otherwise, I'm just this gelatinous sack floating through the endless infinity of space like everyone else. And I have no conception of who I am. I look in the mirror and I see something that looks like the pictures and the videos that are online. And when I hear this recording back, I'm like, oh, that's what I sound like. But it's when I have conversations with you and other people like this, and I'm like, oh man, must be doing something right if I get to sit down with Aleph and hear that. So thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Now, in terms of how that success could be replicated, great question. And I'm going to for hopefully not distill it down into one core idea. And it's the idea of iterative growth. So a phrase, or not even a phrase, a saying that I would like to impart to you and the listeners is, you can't always make the right decision. And I think in modern society, we get so obsessed with making the right decision. And I think we're conditioned in many ways to make the right decision, right? You think about even just posting something online. How many times do we wring that photo or that video through filters and edit the contrast and take out blemishes and adjust the hue and saturation and apply this filter and run it through Visco, all of that, only to post something and you're like, oh man, that wasn't worth it. That only got like 10 likes. So we're conditioned on the one hand, very simple things like social media and just the marketing and advertising engine around us is just the idea that we're not perfect enough, we're not efficient enough, not progressive enough, not satisfied enough, not innovative enough. And we feel this performance pressure to rise to the occasion and to get it right the first time. Pick the right school, pick the right program, get the right job, find the right person to settle down with, all of that. And then we make those decisions and we realize that, oh man, this wasn't the right decision for me. Like, I'm having that feeling talking to you. I'm like, yo, should we start the podcast again? Could I do a better intro? Could I be more coherent? Could I be more succinct? Yeah, obviously I could do all of those things, but still not going to be as perfect as I want it to be. It's still not going to be as perfect as you want it to be. So the advice that I would give to people, if I reverse engineer my career back to its beginning, or at least when I became conscious I was on a career path, is this: you can't always make the right decision, but you can make a decision right now and then make it right. All right, I'm going to say that one more time. You can't always make the right decision, but you can make a decision right now and then make it. So what does that mean? And let's apply this to a simple career path, right? You told me just a couple of minutes ago that you wanted to prove this person wrong, that you wanted to prove people wrong when you left your job. I'm sure the job that you took after you left that job wasn't the perfect job. It probably wasn't the right job and you probably regretted it. But the point is a decision. And hopefully what you made in that decision was a commitment to make a subsequent decision you took, whatever opportunity you found yourself in, whatever job you found yourself in, had more of what you liked from the last job and less of what you didn't like. And maybe your happiness was 60-40. 60% of you was happy, 40% of you was unhappy. Fine. Make sure the next job you find is following that same iterative process where 70% of you in the next job is what you liked in the last job and 30% of it is what you didn't like. And you get closer and closer and that number changes. So where I'm at, I would say 99% of what I do is what I love, and almost to the point where I feel guilty some days because it doesn't feel like work. And 1% of it is the tedium, the nest stress, the use stress that is important to getting to do what I want to do for the rest of my life. So know that it has taken me 15 years consciously and unconsciously to get to where I am right now. But treat yourself, treat your career, treat your life with that iterative approach. And don't be afraid to make quick decisions, even if they're not the right decisions, and then change them. You can literally reinvent yourself every single day of your life. That was a long-winded answer, man.
That is so good, man. That is, yeah, like I've never seen it literally how you described it right now. I never thought of it like that. I was kind of black and white, but it's actually pretty great in terms of like finding your perfect job and like, a happy job and everything, right?
Well, let me ask you a question, man. Like the question. So your parents came from Bangladesh, right? Where were you born?
I was born in Bangladesh, so I came in 106.
Bangladesh. Which city, man?
Chittagong.
Shout out to Chittagong one time, man. So you came, are you the oldest of your siblings? Do you have siblings?
I have a younger brother. His name is Ratty, yeah.
You have a younger brother? Oh, shit. Is your younger brother Ratty Huck?
Yeah, do you know him?
Yo, man, do I know him? Yeah, of course I know him, man. That's wild, man. But you know what?
Oh,
I'm saying that like he's the Ratty Huck that I know. There's probably like 10 million out there.
he's the one who gave me this book, actually. So I'm like, oh.
Oh, then I know that. Then shout out to Ratty Huck. I think I know 2 or 3 Ratty Hucks. But if he's a Ratty Huck that is connected through the Burnout Gamble, then God damn it, man. So you're some fine boys. But let me come back to this. Thank you, man. Let me back to this. So, your parents probably wanted you to sing that some immigrants would call the career, right? Doctor, lawyer, engineer. They wanted their son to not have the hardships, to not endure the immigrant struggles that they had coming to this country and starting from the bottom, right?
Yeah.
But here you are. You're working in marketing, multimedia. I'm not saying you're a disappointment. I don't know. Maybe you feel differently. Days I would say I feel like shit. I fell very short of what my father had envisioned for me. My dad was dead set on Hamza becoming a doctor. So much so that he printed out a label that said Dr. Khan and slapped it on my door when I was a kid. And talk about inception. Talk about pressure, bro. Talk about it, man. Okay, but here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. Am I a doctor? No, far from, man. I'm totally useless. Uh, I'm the most central person there is in Canada right now. But here's the thing. I'm happy, man. I'm self-actualized. I'm making a difference in the way that I can. And, I sleep really late. To get here required me to make quick decisions, man. I had to quickly decide in third year. It's like, yo, do I follow down this path? Third path was all out of the question. I went down the lawyer path. I tried in the beginning business and political science, and my grades were steadily plummeting. Dude, I was the last one to show up to class, the first person to, my grades started out as B pluses and they went down to C's, and I failing classes. And so by the end of third year, this is a disaster. I don't have to be here happy. I had to make a quick decision, and that decision was, do I go all in and pursue my passion, go all in on English and start to learn and relearn what it's like to be creative and to use that part of the brain that I know and I feel good about. So from that point, and there were obviously points that preceded it, but that was the point where I became aware that a change was being made. I then started to follow that mantra that I shared with the listeners and the viewers earlier, which is always make the right decision, but you can make a decision right now and then make it right. And so my career, my life has been a successive string of moments where that mantra factored into my decision making.
Wow, that is crazy. Let's say you and me are in high school and we're both in grade 10. Who is Hamza Khan in grade 10? We always just like, are you so wise?
Oh man, dude, I was okay. Who was I in grade 10? Let me go into some deep, bro. Hamza in grade 10 wore all black, wore a hat down low. Probably had this hairstyle, was growing hair a little bit. Emo as fuck, bro. Like I had a little COS MP3 player, Linkin Park, Billy Talent.
Billy
Bro,
Talent.
you trust me, man. Billy Talent. I don't know. Maybe this was happening at the time. It was like a lot of My Chemical Romance, Stained, listening to Disturbed, Korn, Metallica, Pantera, Anthrax. Oh man, I was just a dark kid, emo, moody. I was just a big black cloud of emotions. That's who I was. And how I synthesized all of those emotions, I channeled that into art. I channeled sketching, painting, drawing, building stuff on Lego, getting carried away with any types of builders that existed in terms of video games. So I was a sort of, and anytime I would play a video game, I would never finish the quest. I would always go off on side quests and mess around and, thinking about the Elder Scrolls, for instance, I would character, but never actually finish the game because I'd go off and start creating potions and stuff and start raiding home. Even when I got into Halo and they allowed you to start building maps in Halo, I was like, oh, this is fantastic. I don't have to play within your rules. I can build my own worlds over here. I was always that kid that had his head in the clouds and didn't quite feel home in the real world. So in high school, to answer your question succinctly, I just felt like this out of place loser. I felt like this out of place loser emo kid that nobody liked, nobody wanted to talk to, and just moody and angry all the time. That's who I was.
And then did something happen where you went from that to who you are now?
Yeah, man. I'm best friends, man. That's what happened. I met my best friends. Shout out to NBP, Amir, Fazan, Zuhair, Suleiman, Azim. There's too many people to label over here. There's about like 12, 13, 14 guys, I think, that were instrumental to me becoming the person that I am, allowed me out of that shell, to step out of that moodiness and become a more self-actualized version of myself. These are guys who, indulge in those moody episodes, but at the same time, as I'm sure you have with your friends, you've got this great banter where they'll bust your chops and, they'll check you and they'll troll you and, they'll say things and do things and jostle you that'll just help you to take yourself less seriously. And I think that was really critical for me. It me to take myself and life less seriously and reorient my focus on the things that are truly important. And so it was nice to have that group of friends, to have that energy, to have that mirror that allowed me to see what I looked like. And it comes back to one of the earlier comments that I made in this, which is like every brand out there, every person, every entity that's self-aware tries to line up how it sees, how it wants to be seen, and how to see it. And I think when you're a teenager, especially, and there's so much going on in your life, grade 10, how old are you? You're 14 at that time? Yeah, you're
I think,
probably 14.
yeah.
Talk about a really tyrannical, tumultuous time in your life where your emotions are firing off, and your hormones are out of control, and everything that you're watching is deep impact on you. The music you're listening to, the TV shows you're watching, the movie you're watching, the games you're playing, the books you're reading are having this indelible imprint, and it's crystallizing your sense of self. And so at that, you don't have the right guidance and right support, you can easily stunted adult later on in life. So I'm really lucky that at that point in my life, people come in and provide a counterbalance to this, like I said, dark cloud of emotions that was walking around through the hallways of Stephen Leacock Collegiate Institute. Shout out to Stephen Leacock.
Really talent. So speaking, that's great, fascinating, man. And speaking on topic of school, right? So a lot of viewers who watch and listen to this content, they're generally, either newcomers, or a lot of them are students as well. They're either in school or just about to graduate from school. Speaking to the student right now, and I'm sure, you probably teach a lot of classes at Ryerson University and everything. For the student who's in maybe, let's say, beginning fourth year, what advice do you have for them during the school period that they should implement in order to ensure when they come out of school, they can either have like clarity about their careers, or they're just lined up to be the most best successful version of themselves? For example, do you think they should study more? Do you think extracurriculars? What are your thoughts on that? And is school important?
Wow. Okay, I'm going to give you a hot tip. It's probably gets me my jobs. I'm probably never going to get hired at Ryerson University or any university for that matter. I'm probably going to end up losing Wyconic and Student Life Network a whole lot of business, but I'm just going to say it because this is for the benefit of students. If you are relying on the college university to be the all end all, if you're relying on the institution to lock up a job and make sure that you self-actualize and happy and successful within you're making a mistake. The university college see you as an individual. They see you as a number. The University of Toronto, love them. They love me. But when I was an undergraduate student, I was nothing but 994595611 to them. I was a butt on a seat. I was somebody, not anybody, I was an account that was transferring money, my wallet, bank account, into their account. And I had to get there in 4 years because I was taking up space. So with that being said, if you understand that these are ultimate businesses and they are indifferent to you for the most part, and yes, the institution obviously is this cold, large, abstract thing. People with institution that do care. Like, if it were people in particular who work institution but cared about the individuals who were passing through it, to Drew Dudley, Alan Grant, and Lisa Arneson, the student affairs trinity that were also instrumental in sort of taking that momentum from me and channeling that, especially when I was falling into being a self-actualized, high-performing student, and then hopefully a contributing citizen. So my advice to the students would be this, quite simply. If you are in college or university to get a job, you are there for the wrong reason. You're not going to get a job because you're graduating with a degree, unless you're maybe in a gatekeeper industry like dentistry or meds. And even then, the stakes are so high. Onus is on you, student, to make sure that you are fashioning together a co-curricular experience, that you are clubs and associations, joining intramural sports if you can, starting organizations, experimenting, creating your own YouTube channel, your own podcast, finding communities offline, supplementing your learning with your own books and reading and viewing, doing an informational interview, really building another layer on traditional legacy curriculum, if you will. Because what's going to set you apart is having those experiences and being able to break the mold of every other student who is just taking the easy route. And the easy route is just show up, do your reading, on your exams, and walk off that convocation stage with the same piece of paper that everyone else has. And these universities and colleges are turning out thousands of students at a time. So how do you set yourself apart from 5,000 other students in an economy like this that are all on the same jobs? It's by being divergent. You have your own path, you have your own brand. You've sort of went left when everyone else was right. And so I, as an employer, when I see you, I'm like, whoa, you're doing something differently over here. You've taken learnings and you've applied them. You've synthesized them in ways that set you apart from else. You're a self-starter. You're a lifelong learner. All of these soft skills, all attributes that would make it more likely that you would thrive in the modern ones that I don't believe are forged of a traditional class environment. So, long story short, what do you get involved outside of the class?
100%. I couldn't agree with you even more. Like, it's crazy. Do you plan to send your kids to university?
That's a great question, man. It depends on what universities look like. It depends on what universities look like. So I would be if I said that the university hasn't been still in shaping my way of thinking, and my reasoning, my critical faculties, and also getting me with a network that I can benefit from. But did I need to pay $40,000 for it? Did I need to give up 4 years of my life for it? I have a model. I have a problem with the barrier to access financially and the barrier to access in terms of time. And not only that, as an instructor and having seen behind the curtains, now being able to experience what it's like I could get away with being a subpar instructor, and it would be so easy for me to phone it in and use the same case studies and not actually care. Like, all credit to Ryerson, great institution, but I evaluated once a semester. And I know when I'm going to be evaluated in advance. So I know that in week 8, for instance, somebody's going to drop in and they're going to evaluate. I can game up and for week 8, wear a snazzy suit and say all the right things and dazzle them in week 8. And suddenly my evaluation says, Hamza is a very competent instructor and I would recommend to hire him again. And then what about the other weeks? The other weeks in a 12-week semester, phone it in. And it's disheartening for me because I have heard from students multiple times that the thing that I bring to the classroom to them is novel, to them is unique, to them is like, I'm very lucky that I have my students tell me things like, Hamza, you're the instructor I ever had. And, on the one hand, that makes me happy, but at the same time, I'm like, wow, I think I'm doing the bare minimum. I think that I'm doing what every instructor should do. So if your other instructors are not passionate, not excited, not updating the curriculum every semester, if they're not asking you what you want, if they're not flipping the classroom environment and engaging you, what the hell are you paying for? Why are you here? And especially during COVID-19, where you don't have to physically be in an institution, why are you studying at the university or college on the street? Casting your aim elsewhere. You could study literally anywhere in the world right now if you wanted to. You could study at Harvard, you could study at Yale, MIT, you could study in New Zealand, you could study in Hong Kong. There's no reason why you should go and study at UTM or Sheridan or, I'm just assuming geographically where you might be. There's no reason to do that. There's no reason to do that anymore. Would I send my kids to school? It depends. And it depends on have the colleges and universities innovated and adapted to the realities of tomorrow's workforce. Have they have they innovated and created some sort of passport? What I mean by that is, do they have the ability to learn at different institutions? Can they earn credits, work experience, entrepreneurial experience based on being creators? Has the timeline shortened? Have they recruited interns who are in tune with the realities of the modern workforce versus profs that are caught up in their ways and haven't changed their curriculum in over a decade? So these universities and colleges are keeping with the reality of tomorrow's workforce. I feel comfortable about sending my kids to college or university. If that wasn't the case, I would tell them, build your own.
Oh,
The
wow.
beautiful thing, you could create your own curriculum. You could string together some audible content, some Skillshare, bunch of TED Talks, and go work in the field and, turn there. And I think you could earn those skills and so much more that I don't think the universities are capable of replicating. But with that being said, there is something about that 4 or 5 years in a sanctioned environment of learning where your idea and your person is challenged and you subject yourself to academic rigor there's something about that space, that sanction that I don't you can easily earn if you
Mm,
just go into the workforce right away. So figuring it
that's
out, brother. I'm figuring it out.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't, wow, like to know that, you work behind the scenes, and behind the scenes, that's sort of what's going on. That's pretty, because I remember going to New York and I was like, this is the most boring thing ever. I can't wait to leave. And I remember this one instructor that was so inspiring, and he brought real life examples. And I remember there was a time this girl I found cute and I liked. She was like, "Hey, Alif, skip class and come hang out with me alone," right? And I was like, no, because I have class with this instructor. So I actually ditched the girl. I didn't talk to her the whole day. I instead went to class because of just how he is as a person, how he's teaching. I was so inspired. It was just a whole mind blowing moment I had with it. It was crazy.
I love it, man. That makes me happy because and that sort of restores my faith. That anecdote right there restores my faith in the college university experience, the post-secondary, just the educational experience that could be. And as we start rewarding our instructors, rewarding our teachers, and treating them like the vanguards, the guardians, the shapers of our future that they are, and start rewarding them commensurately, I think the world will be a place. I think, if I were to be the leader of the free world, one of the first I would do is make sure that teachers are the highest paying jobs out the market. It's a crime to me that I have some friends in the States, especially who are teachers who can't even afford for their classrooms because of how, the pay discrepancy that exists.
That's crazy. Oh my God. So one thing you're mentioning a lot is the idea of personal brand, and and I think you broke it down in an interesting way, how others see you, how you see yourself and whatnot. So speaking to the person, let's say they're working a 9 to 5, they've been out of school for a bit right now, and they maybe do some admin work at work, come home, relax and chill, right? And they know that they need to increase their online visibility and grow what's called a personal brand for that individual who probably is pretty beginner with this whole kind of stuff, but knows they need to do it. How, first of all, how would you define personal brand? And second, what are some practical ways that person can go about creating a personal brand when they don't think they're that special?
Yeah, man, great question. So, the term term brand in general is just this icky concept, man. When you think about brand, you think about companies, products, you think about just the business of it. And I understand why that's a big turnout. First of all, if you're in that camp, replace the word brand with reputation. It's literally the same thing.
Mm.
And the best definition of a brand slash reputation, people say not in the room. So when I leave this pod and you leave this podcast, you're probably going to talk to Ratty about what this was like. And hopefully you're going to say things that are consistent with how I want to be spoken about in the world. And, the way you introduce, wow, how could it be if I could live in a way and if I could act in a way and make sure that every interaction I have with everyone is consistent with that vision of who I want to be here. So building your reputation, building your personal brand should be an exercise first and foremost in actualization and becoming the person you want to be. I call it lining up your resume with your eulogy. You want to make sure that both things are identical, where when you die, people are standing around your grave when you're 6 feet under. They just have to read your LinkedIn profile because hopefully it'll be consistent with the type of impact that you've had in the world. Maybe not your LinkedIn profile, but to read your resume. So synchronize your resume with your eulogy. And actually, that's one of my favorite hacks for building your personal. Best way you can personal is to imagine what you want people to say about you when you're dead. You want to say what you want people to say about you when you're no longer in the biggest room of all, the room of life. And so when all is said and done, after Alif has moved the world and worked in multiple cities and started things and ended things and built things and destroyed things and you lived a full life. What do you want people to say about you? Do you want them to say that you were a kind person, to say that you left the world in a better place? Do you want them to say that you were a maven of marketing? Do you want them to say that you were a good husband, a good father, a good brother? What are those things you want them to say? And so I think everybody owes it to themselves to
Mm.
sit down one day, turn on some music, maybe play some Linkin Park, some Billy Talent, I don't know, whatever gets the juice going, and write out just pen or don't focus on grammar, spelling, syntax, anything. Just let it flow. Write out your eulogy. What do you hope people will say about you? And put that away, and then come back to it the next day with a highlighter and highlight some phrases and ideas that recur. And what you're going to find is this sort of word cloud, this nebulous form of ideas and concepts that contains some truth about your personal brand. It's this idea of who you want to become that speaks to something transcendent. It speaks to something beyond career. And I think this is where a lot of young professionals and a lot of students especially get hung up. They get hung on their value being earned through the marketplace. So look, man, all the ways that you describe me, speaker, author, entrepreneur, all those are things that I do. They're not who I am. There's a huge difference, right? My friends, my parents, they don't care about the things that I do. They care about who I am. Am I kind? Am I compassionate? Am I a good listener? Do I have time? Do I check in on them? Am I friendly? Do I hold the door open? Am I there during a crisis? All of those things. None of them give a shit about how many views I have, subscribers and listeners, and what the last size of the check that I cashed was for speaking. All of that doesn't actually matter. Those are things that I do. To paraphrase James, he said in an interview, I'm not a basketball player, a guy who plays basketball. So it's important for young professionals, for talent, for students to detach themselves from their market utility and what they're worth in the marketplace. If you anchor your sense of self in that, if you build your personal brand based on what you can do for other people, career-wise, you're setting yourself up for the unhappy life. So my advice to everyone would think about their life holistically and begin with the end. Begin with how your life is going to end and work backwards from that. And then every single day, do small, consistent things that will make it more likely that one day your day will sync up with your eulogy.
Wow, dude, that's so fascinating. You know what's fascinating? I thought you were going to talk about content and social media, but it's interesting. The way you talk about brand is just who you are.
Okay. No. I'm glad you brought that up, because these days I have been finding myself going off into sort of abstract, philosophical and, borderline psychedelic rants, or US calls them symphonies. Let me give you some practical advice. I think that to the listeners, I owe that to the viewers. So the first thing I'll say is this. One thing is more advice, happy to give it to you. Don't overthink it. And this comes back to the philosophy, you guys make the right decision, but you can make a decision right now and then make it right. Document of creating. That's the first I would say. So a good example, right before this podcast was recorded, you went on Instagram and jumping on a recorder with Hamza. You didn't have to do that, but you used to do that. And what that did is anticipation for this recording. Even though you might think nobody cares, why would anybody even engage with that content? There's a good chance done as you've planted in the imagination of casuals or listeners that, hey, they're talking to this guy. I went on his profile. He seems interesting. So when the episode drops, I'll follow through on that. You're bringing people along with you. You're shoring up and training your audience to expect certain types of content from you. And this is where a lot of marketers and brands don't put it. You have to train your audience. Imagine if tomorrow you started rapping. Okay, that would be so off-brand for Alif, and I'm sure you'd be a decent rapper. You've got some great talent in your circle over there. I think Astawa even tried his hand at rapping one time. Shout out to Astawa. But if you suddenly started rapping, your audience would be like, what happened, man? That makes no sense. Like I follow Alif to get updates on his family and to see his career in multimedia, producing, marketing, and hear success and interesting people. Where did this come from? This came out of nowhere.
So it seems like the advice that you'd have is essentially document the journey, share your progression, and from that, a brand will naturally sort of curate through social media and what it is. And another part of that is also who you are through your day-to-day life. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so, man. I think let people in, be authentically yourself. And I know that phrase gets thrown around quite a bit. It's like, be authentically yourself. You see that, it just comes up as little posts on your Instagram. You see it on coffee table books, on the side of mugs and stuff. But there's some truth to that, man. I have never reached the level of success that I'm experiencing today. I wouldn't have reached it had I not leaned into who I am authentically, being authentically myself, and disclosing with you, even on a podcast like this, that I was into Billy Talent, that I was an emo kid, and I experienced all these ups and downs. And I think that humanizes you, like you said, makes you more relatable, makes you more accessible. Once upon a time, success, or at least, this idea of building a personal brand, was rooted in the idea of exclusivity and distance. You had to appear to be something bigger than you actually were. You had to appear distant and aloof and, uh, you know, uh, removed from the audience. But I think the opposite is true. And actually, a great brand that has done a complete 180 on their career is Will Smith. Will Smith at one time was one of the biggest stars on the planet, and then kind of faded away, and has reemerged now as this bona fide internet personality, where I imagine many of his fans who follow him on Instagram and whatnot have no idea what movies he was in, just because he's now this really great, personable social media personality that speaks to you online as though you're the only person in the room. And I think that that is so unique, so powerful. And a big part of it is his humility and lowering those guards down and not behaving the way that a typical celebrity behaves, and being very open and honest and vulnerable and documenting his life, not creating content for the sake of creating content and creating distance, but by documenting the day-to-day of his life, the good, the bad, the ugly, and letting you in and letting you have access to his inner sanctum. And I think that's what it's all about. That's what personal branding is. That's what it should be. And I hope it's what it will continue to be, because there's a clear trend now towards that level of transparency and authenticity that simply wasn't there when I was beginning my career. And the things that I were taught are, obsolete.
That's fascinating. So I get this question a lot on the same topic, and people come to me like, Leif, I'm kind of nervous to make a post or put myself out there. Who will listen to me, and why am I so special? And people won't find me interesting. For those who are maybe like afraid to put themselves out there on social media and start documenting, their journey, basically. Do you have any tips for them to get over that sort of like imposter syndrome, that little bump, before they make their first post?
It's a great question, man. Let me think about this one.
Yeah.
Okay. This is going to be a bit of a hot take, but your friends are not your target audience.
Oh.
Yeah, your friends are not your target audience, man. The way I post online, I think my friends think is corny. They think I'm a square. They think I'm fronting. They think all of these things because they know the real me. But they know a version of me. They know a version of me that is comfortable in that particular setting, that particular circumstance. But if I'm to scale, if I'm to build a business, I have to find the people that want what I have to give them. And my friends don't want things that I'm selling. My friends don't want to buy my books. I mean, obviously they support and they buy it. They don't want to buy my books. They want to watch my videos. They don't want to take my classes. They don't want to, sign up to become members of Student Life Network and Iconic, all of that. But there are people out there who do want that. And if when you think about content strategy, it's really about synchronizing, or at least overlapping, the story you want to tell, the business you want to do, and what your audience expects. So for me, I first had to get rid of that fear that, I'm not here to impress my friends. I'm not here to impress my family. They're more than welcome to come along for the ride and follow me. But if I am to build my brand online, so to speak, I have to think about scale. I have to think about getting hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands and someday, hopefully, millions of followers. And I have to be something for them that isn't the same thing for, my friends and my family. So I will say this, succinctly speaking, if people unfollow you, if people think you're corny, that's perfectly okay. In fact, I encourage it. You do want people to unfollow you. You do want people to age out and to be culled away from your following, because that only helps with your engagement rates. Find the people who celebrate you. Find the people who love what you do, who like what you do, who hang on to your every word, who download your shit, who watch and subscribe and share. Those are the people that you want to lean into. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure you have that, Aleph. I know I have that. I know who the super fans are, the super followers are. And I try to make sure that I'm living up to their expectations. Are you a fan of wrestling?
No, I'm not. I
WWE?
watched it the other day. I was
do you know John Cena?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and John Cena. Yeah.
John Cena, right? John Cena is a legend. And he said something that, I don't know, for some reason just stuck with me. At one point in his career, he was so hated, man. He was booed all the time. Anytime he would show up, he was booed. And one time he got on a mic and he was like, hey, every time I come out here to these packed arenas, I hear 7,000 boos and I hear 2,000 cheers. I don't do it for the 7,000 boos. I do it for the 2,000 cheers. Something like that. I got the numbers wrong, but basically it's about playing to your audience, playing to the people that celebrate you, not tolerate you.
I see. So with that being said, if you are trying to be authentic and sharing your journey, but then you need to think backwards and think about the audience that you want to target and create content for that. How do you balance being authentic on your day-to-day life while at the same time appealing to that target audience that you're trying to attract? Like, what is the balance in that then? That's one thing
I
I
think
struggle with. I'm curious.
I think eventually it'll sync up, right? I think eventually you're going to realize that you can blend both of them together. So you have to earn permission space. I think if we're coming back to Kanye West, you have to produce beats for everyone before you can discover your own voice. So get into the business right now of trying to find a market, trying to find a group, trying to find an audience, and be who they need you to be. And lead with that, but then begin to blend and infuse your personality into it. So you're seeing now more and more on my feeds. If you're following me at Hamza K on Instagram, for instance, I'm now starting to now freely share my family, starting to share more about my faith, my heritage, my personal preferences, my innermost feelings, and these are things that I just couldn't share right off the bat when I started my career. So I had to earn some permission space and develop a reputation and develop familiarity with my audience, and then begin to gradually let them know who I am. Now, with that being said, a case can totally be made for starting with the opposite, starting by being authentically yourself right from the get-go. And, social media platforms like TikTok are perfect for that. I think on TikTok, there's a refreshing sense of freedom. You can just do whatever you want. You can make some dances. You can clean up your depression room over there. You can go on rants and, skate down a highway with some cranberry juice. And next thing you've built up a whole business. So have some fun with that. And like I said, it comes back to this idea that you can't always make the right decisions, but you can make a decision and then make it right. And so on social media, if you go out there and you make your first post and nobody likes it, that's fine. Make another post. Make another post, make another post, and maybe one person's going to like it. And if that one person liked it, you got them. You did something that forced somebody to double tap. And if one person can like it, that means two people can like it. If two people like it, a third person can like it. That's how it starts, man. Nobody ever starts off their Instagram account with 1,000 followers. You always start with 1, and then 2, and then 3, and you scale up.
That's so powerful. I swear you and Mahfouz are just quotes on quotes. I interviewed him too. He's dropping quotes. You're dropping quotes. Like, your friends are not your target audience. That's my new thing on my shirt now. I swear to God.
Oh man, shout out to Mahfouz, man. Whenever I do connect with Mahfouz, it's just like, the problem is we're both listeners and we both want to listen to each other. So nobody ever says anything. And
oh, really?
No, it's a beautiful thing, man. I love that guy to death, man. That guy inspires me and motivates me, man. Every time I talk to him, I'm like, wow, oh shit, man. Like, is this what it's like to talk to me? And I think he feels the same way sometimes too, man.
It's fascinating watching you guys speak to each other on the lives and Instagram lives, because it's very poetically calm. That's how I would describe you guys. It's just very respectful, like calm, easy, and really understanding one another. Because I have friends, we're just like yap, and we're hype and everything. But with you guys, like a nice I don't know how to describe it. It was just fascinating.
No, I appreciate that, man. Sometimes you find people with whom you have great chemistry, and Mahfouz is one of those people who I'm just grateful that he's alive and he's doing what he's doing, but especially grateful that we came into each other's lives and I get to see him and cheer him on. When you see Mahfouz, when I see Mahfouz, I see like a road almost. I'm like, oh, anytime he does something, I'm like, oh, that's a possible road now. Like, he is extending the runway of what's possible for me. I see myself represented in Mahfouz. So whenever Mahfouz says something or does something or accomplishes something, I'm like, oh, interesting. If Mahfouz did it, maybe I should try it. Maybe I should do it. Maybe I can do it. It validates me. It inspires me, man. And think about how many people we've seen in our lives that don't look like us and they're doing something that we want to do. But then our mind does that whole thing of like, hey, you know what? It's a white dude. what are you talking about? I mean, that's a black girl. I mean, or that person has $1 million, or that person was born into a family, and that person lives here and has that. But when you see somebody who, in terms of intersectionality, is like, whoa, like we're just a few kilometers away from each other, both around the same age, both similar backgrounds, same skin color, same attitude, same disposition, same personality types. I'm like, whoa, anything you do is making my life better. And anything I do, hopefully, is making your life better. Together, we are hacking away at life and creating more opportunities for each other. So it's never really a competition with Mahfouz or anyone. It's never really a competition with anybody who I look at and I'm like, we look the same and we share similar backgrounds and whatnot. We're all in this together. And together, we're forming an archetype of a person, an idea of a person. There's no real Alif. There's no real Hamza. We are basically beta tests for whoever comes next.
Whoa, that is you so deep, man. Oh, crazy. You know, I feel like you two remind me of me and Astawa. I don't know why, in some weird way. I feel like you guys like the generation above, and we're just kind of like using you
Well,
as guidance.
here's it. I'm going to trip you out right now. I'm sure that Mahfouz would say that you and Astawa remind us of us. And
Yeah.
it bugs me out, right? The other day I had Mahfouz, Astawa guest lecture one of my classes. And as soon as that class was done, I went to my partner, Bailey, and I'm like, man, we got to rethink our game. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm telling you, man, we think we're good speakers, but you should have seen Astawa today. She's like, tell me more. I'm like, dude, this guy had such a crisp setup. Like his camera was on point. The audio was so good. He was so composed. His slides looked like nothing I've ever seen before. Like I'm telling you, his interaction, the ability to synthesize ideas and to connect with the audience in just in half an hour period. I'm like, yo, he's going to eat our lunch. Like we have to be careful because this guy, I imagine the way I looked at him during that talk was like how, Kanye and Jay-Z must have looked at Drake and been like, oh, we have to create Watch the Throne, because if we don't create Watch the Throne, we're going to be irrelevant. We're dinosaurs. Like this is the new thing. This is the guy. This is the boy. This is the future of the industry. And that's how I feel, man. Like I feel honored to be on this podcast because I'm like, yo, how old are you, by the way, brother?
25.
That's crazy, man. When I was 25, I had nothing going on. I was not, bro, when I say nothing, I don't even know what I was doing at 25, but I'm telling you, it was not creating a podcast, building a personal brand, cultivating an audience, and having conversations at this depth. So that makes me jealous because I'm like, who are you going to be when you're 33? And it's tripping me out because I'm like, oh man, now I need to think about like, what would Alif do if he was 33 with the knowledge and expertise and the trajectory that he has? And I, in the future, so to speak, need to catch up to that version of Alif that I'm imagining at 33.
Whoa, that is so trippy, man. What? Yeah, I'm so inspired right now. Like, yeah, I can't.
The feeling is mutual, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. Like, I do. I really appreciate that, and I feel like we can. Yeah, I can't. Like, I feel like I just you like you said, you tripped me out. You really did trip me out right there. But yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that, and I look up to you guys too. Just last couple questions, and then we're pretty much done.
Sure,
These are questions from my brother and Astawa. So Astawa asked, you're a world-class speaker. You own a marketing agency. You co-founded 2 businesses. You work full-time in Ryerson. You wrote your own book. You have a podcast, and you're possibly considering, or you're probably in your master's right now, right?
Right.
How the heck do you manage this? Like, even me saying that, I'm like, what? Like,
and please cut me off if I go off on any more tangents, man, because I'm becoming hyper aware that I've been going off and using more words and creating word soup when I didn't actually need to. So how do I manage all of it? I trust my future self with it. I don't have control of my day to day. I have imagined what my future is going to be like, and I have reverse engineered the priorities for that future version of Hamza. And that future version of Hamza needs me every single day to get 8 hours of sleep, to wake up in the morning, to not oversaturate my body with caffeine, to work out, to allocate this much time to work. And so I would say I'm very disciplined, and I hate it because discipline is doing what you hate, but doing it like you love it. I'm doing it with the idea that someday future Hamza is going to need all of the things that I'm doing today to catch up there. So how do I do it? My calendar manages me. I don't manage myself. My calendar manages me. And my calendar is a reflection of my priorities. So in my calendar right now is time every single day to move every single priority in my life forward. There's everything's mapped out to a T. There's time to sleep, time to eat, time to read, time to, relax. All of that is in there, and it's all proportionate to the size of the goals that I have for myself. So a priority for me right now is, for example, graduating from my class, this one class that I'm taking, my master's program, with the highest marks possible. In order for that to happen, I have to carve out time and space to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in my calendar, the night before class, there's no programming. The day of class, there's no meetings in the morning. I have preparation for the class, some downtime after the class, and I have on the weekends allocated some unshakable calendar blocks to actually do the reading and study. That's how I succeed. There's no other way to do it. You can't just wing it. You can't just be like, I'm going to do great in this class. Well, how are you going to do great in this class? You actually have to commit and put some resources behind it. And the most valuable resource that you have is your time. It's not your money. It's not your energy or your attention. It's your time. So carve out some time and put that time up against your priorities, whatever those are. And so short answer, use your calendar. If you don't have a calendar, or let me put it this way. Your calendar is a reflection of your priorities. If I open up your calendar, I can tell you right away what's important to you.
That's so fat. What do you do when you don't feel like doing something though? Let's say something comes up on the calendar, you should do it. You drag yourself through it and you're like, I'll push it later. What do you do any hacks or like things to your brain to make you like it more? You know what I mean? Because this is something I struggle with.
Yeah. If you don't like doing it, there's a couple of ways to hack it, right? So one of the hacks that I have is like the 3-minute rule, which is I give myself 3 minutes to begin the project. So let's say, podcast was one and I had to jump on this podcast and I was like, my mind is just like, oh man, don't do it, man. Like you're too overwhelmed. You're too tired in the headspace. I turn on a timer and it's like, I have 3 minutes to just start the process of the podcast. What is the first thing that I can do to get in the headspace? What is the equivalent of getting 1 foot out of your bed in the morning when you don't want to wake up? Well, 1 foot out of bed in the morning is set up the mic. That's it. That's all you have to do. Just set up the mic. Okay, now you've set up the mic. What's the next step? Oh, the next step is plug it into the roadcaster. What's the next step? Turn on the roadcaster. And before you know it, 12 minutes later, we're doing a podcast. That's as simple as that. Just break it down into bite-sized pieces and start with the most easily accessible piece to begin something. So let's say going to the gym. Right now we're in the middle of a pandemic. You don't want to go to the gym. That's fine. You don't have to go to the gym, but let's say the routine opens up again or gyms open up again and you want to get back in the routine. That's fine. You don't want to wake up in the morning and go to the gym. Okay. Well, I hate going to the gym personally, but I'll tell you what I love. I love the feeling that I feel after I work out. I love the feeling of my brain firing on all cylinders. I love the feeling of my metabolism working in a way that makes me not depend on caffeine for energy. So try to fall in love with the end result, the outcome of that difficult thing, and accept that the stress of doing that difficult thing in the short term is necessary. And there's a difference between eustress and de-stress. We all know the same definition of stress, D-I-S-T-R-E-S-S, distress, which is stress that's bad for you, that throws you off your equilibrium. But what about eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S? That is stress that is good, healthful, that brings you closer to your goals and brings you closer to your definition of happiness. So if you start to reframe those things in your calendar that are stressing you out, if you ask yourself, is this a good stress or bad stress? And if it's a good stress, if you simply reframe a bad stress as good stress, it's actually enough to change your physical reaction to that stressor, studies have shown. So that's one thing I would suggest that people do.
Yeah, you're right. It's so simple. Just start with the small. Just remember how good it feels and that'll eventually create the momentum. That's genius.
A good example is like you doing this podcast, right? Like I'm sure that this podcast has worked for you because I get to show up and record this podcast and dip. You actually have to export the file, edit it, synchronize the video. There's so much work that goes into it. Trust me, as a fellow podcaster, I know the struggle. But if you do it and if you're consistent with it, then you get to enjoy all of the upside of this. You get to get new followers, new fans, new listeners, new subscribers, new downloads. You get to build the Alif brand. You get to cash out when there's sponsors on your ads, sponsors on your podcast. Our relationship just got deeper now. I have your number. You have mine. It's no longer this, we see each other from a distance. Now we know each other. I know I'm invested in you. So this, as stressful as it was for you, has actually improved your life dramatically in ways that haven't manifested yet.
Wow. And you're right. There's so many layers I didn't see. Because you're right. I would think like, posting content, people like it, whatever. But you're right. There's a relationship now between you and me. Like you said, I have your number now. So there's benefits with.
And that's actually the least impressive part of all of this. The most impressive thing is when you apply for a job, whatever that next job is, your podcast becomes your resume. Right? Let's say you apply for a multimedia producer job. You're like, yeah, listen to my podcast. I'm, 45 episodes deep. Listen to the crisp audio production. Look at the caliber of the guests that I brought on. I know this. I'm a self-starter. I'm self-motivated, self-funded. Did this all on my own. You can trust that if you entrust me with a budget and priorities and people, that I'll be able to apply the same strategies that it took to get my podcast off the ground to build this business unit, whatever that is.
Wow, that's so true. Yeah. So for anyone that's listening or watching this right now, if you're job seeking or whatever, it's important you actually take the time to develop your own skill set, start your own projects. So then when it comes time for an employer looking at you, you can say, I literally did this. And, last question, and this is more for my brother, and I think this is the part he really looks up to you about, is your public speaking skills. There's probably a whole podcast on this, but generally, let's say when you have a TED Talk coming up, right? Can you walk us through your prep part, the moment right before you hit the stage, and the moment you are on the stage and performing? Like, what does the process look like to Hamza?
Great question. Writing is so underrated, man. I don't know why this seems to be something that people shy away from or is going out of vogue, but if you're not writing, it's like this, man. Consuming content is breathing in, producing content is breathing out. And if you're watching a Netflix show, if you're listening to music, if you're reading a book, you're breathing in. But in order to fully engage with the ideas, in order to make those ideas your own and to develop your point of view, you have to express yourself. And simply posting on social media isn't enough. I think that people owe it to themselves to write. Writing is one of the most, it's how people make sense of the world, man. And if people don't write, and if they don't, and emails are one thing, but like keep a diary, keep a journal, write some fiction, write some nonfiction, write something for yourself. In order to develop the best point of view, you have to write. Whether you're a comedian, whether you're a public speaker, whether you're a CEO, whether you're standing up and delivering a class presentation, write it in advance. Don't wing it. Don't rely on the moment to produce thoughts. Those thoughts may be good, but if you want to guarantee that they'll be good, write them out, because there's something about writing that requires you to form a sequence of ideas that are logical and flow from each other. So when you write out your ideas, you are then able to develop more retention of those ideas and critically engage with those ideas. So I write every talk that I do, and I write it verbatim.
Really?
So, yeah. Every single talk that I do, I write out. Even if I've done that talk 100 times, I will at least a week before rewrite that entire talk from scratch. So for example, I'm doing a talk tomorrow. It's a talk that I've done hundreds of times. I rewrote the whole talk. And it's the same talk. I'm doing the same talk that I'm doing for this client that I've done 100 times before, but me writing it does something for me. It gives me the confidence that when I'm on stage, when I'm delivering that talk, I'm like, oh yeah, these are my ideas. These are uniquely my ideas. And they're going to be expressed in a way that I have spent and I've labored thinking about in a manner that is logical for the audience and that flows sonically so that the audience enjoys it. It's about simple things like creating short, punchy sentences, working on rhyme schemes, choosing words that add emphasis, and maybe adding in breaks and dramatic cues that increase the impact of the performance. All of these things need to be written in advance. So I would say number one, write. Number two, practice in advance.
Just to go back to that real quick.
Yeah, go for it, man.
You don't write from memorization. It's more that clearly expressing the ideas, right? That's the big distinction.
Oh yeah, I never memorize. The only thing I memorize in my talks is the first minute. The only reason I memorize the first minute is so that I can develop that flow very quickly to get that audience engagement right away and feel confident. And then after I memorize that first minute, what I do for the rest of the presentation is I'm winging it. But I'm not really winging it because I'm actually expressing ideas that are uniquely mine. They're my ideas. I just wrote them and they have now been uploaded to my subconscious. So the writing process is like creating some sort of relationship between your body and your mind, man. It's like it's synchronizing both of them together. So that's why I write. And then I practice. I watch myself, speak. I hate watching myself speak, but I do that so I can start to eliminate some of the things that I do. I'm aware that I have these nervous tics. I'm aware that, I squint a lot and I use a lot of conversational mitigation sometimes. And the sign language of my hand is very disproportionate. Like this whole time I've been using my right hand because this whole other time in my left hand, I've had a stress ball, just trying to ground myself in the experience. So I watch myself to know how I'm being possibly perceived through video. So do that and then practice in front of people that you care about and see what their reactions are. And remember that the writing and the speaking process is naturally messy. It should be a lot of excess and then you should trim away. I forget who says this. I really need to find out, but to get to perfect doesn't involve, I think it was Da Vinci. You'll know it's perfect not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. So you want to get to the most lean version of your talk. So that's the preparation part. There's just two pieces of advice that I can give to Rady and everybody else listening here. But as far as preparation and the day of is concerned, I would say show up early. Make sure you've ironed out all the tech and logistical issues. Get comfortable. Have a good meal, maybe 2 or 3 hours before so that you're on a relatively empty stomach when it's happening and your body isn't competing for resources and attention. Don't drink cold water because that actually constricts your vocal cords. Make sure you have warm water with you. Use the bathroom. Listen to some music that pumps you up and gets you into the right headspace. And most importantly, when it's time to talk, I would say smile. Get into a positive headspace. Speak slowly because your adrenaline will naturally provoke you to speak faster than you think you're speaking. And have fun, man. Like that's the most important thing. What a beautiful thing it is to have the opportunity to share your thoughts and ideas on a forum, on a podcast, on a stage, wherever. This idea that I have someone like Alif that I'm talking to that's listening to me, but not just you are a conduit for your hundreds and thousands of listeners. And they are all listening to me through you. So I consider this to be a great privilege to be able to speak to you. And I'm having fun, and hopefully I haven't put people to sleep or caused them to unsubscribe from the podcast. Hopefully this has been an eye-opening and valuable experience for them. So that's what it is, man. Smile, speak slow, have fun.
Dude, I feel like you just gave me a whole crash course. I feel guilty for just taking that for free. Like, seriously, that is so... I never thought of actually writing out a whole presentation before delivering it. Generally, when I get asked to speak on workshops, nonprofits, or whatever it is, I just create the slides and I'm like, I think I'll talk about this, I'll talk about this, and I'll just kind of go. But you're right. If I'm more methodological and treat this like a craft, who knows, I'll probably deliver the best presentation in the world. Who knows, right? But yeah, it's very fascinating, man.
There you go, man.
There we go. Awesome, dude. Hamza, man, like, whew, this is the best podcast I've ever done, man. Like, you dropped so many gems. Where people are inspired by this. Like, I can guarantee that. Where can people find you? How can people, yeah.
Thank you, man. The pleasure was all mine. And I apologize. I know that we got off to a bit of a rocky start where I was trying to find my footing and, transitioning off a really busy day and switching multiple contexts. I know I wasn't my most coherent during the podcast. I hope we get to do this again. And I hope that I get to iron out the kinks in my Wi-Fi situation over here. I know that the lag kind of reappeared. Did it reappear?
Just a bit, slightly.
Just a bit? Okay, good to know, man. Not as bad as before, but I hope that the next time I come back on, that I can be much more concise and much more actionable with my insights and not go off on these long tangents. But I hope that regardless, it was still valuable for people. Where you can find me, I am most active on Instagram at Hamza K. I'm also getting back on Twitter after a long hiatus at Hamza K on Twitter as well. I also drop a couple of things here and there on LinkedIn and on Facebook as well. And I have season 2 of my podcast coming in January, and nothing would make me happier, Alif, than to have you on as a guest. So let's talk about that afterwards.
Yeah, 100%. That'd be an honor, man. Perfect, Hamza. Well, thank you so much, brother, for doing this. We will talk to you soon, okay?
Take care, brother. All the best, man.